Committee Room 21. Sound. Committee Room 21. Sound. Committee Room Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29. Committee Room 29, Sound. 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 Committee Room 29. 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 Sound. Committee Room 29, 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 Sound. Committee Room 29. 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 Sound. Committee Room 29, 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 sound. Committee Room 29. 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 Sound. Committee Room 29, 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 sound. Committee Room 29. 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 Sound. Committee Room 29, 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 Sound. Committee Room 29. 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 Sound. Committee Room 29, 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 sound. Committee Room 29. 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 Sound. Committee Room 29.
Good morning and welcome to the Infrastructure Committee. I'm going to hand over to the clerk. In the first instance, we have been in closed session since 10 o'clock this morning, and we are just going into open session now to deal with the business. I'm just going to ask Michael just to summarise what we have been doing for the first hour.
Yes, just members were considering committee amendments to the Water Sustainable Drainage and Flood Management Bill, and they're about to perhaps agree the new draft timetable.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Michael. Are members content to agree the new draft timetable?
Agreed.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So I'd like to welcome anyone in the public gallery, and nearly for once the public gallery is nearly full of a whole range of people, some of my work experience students and some others, but you're very welcome this morning. Just to let you know that you can use mobile phones during the committee session, but you should not take any photos or videos of the proceedings this morning. I'll give a brief overview of today's business. We have already taken some time to deliberate on the Water Sustainable Drainage and Flood Management Bill. We will receive oral evidence from the Department for Infrastructure on the SL1 Grants to Water and Sewerage Undertakers Order Northern Ireland 2027. We will receive oral evidence from the Department for Infrastructure on the Eastern Transport Plan. We will consider 4 proposals for SL1s for statutory rules which are subject to Assembly procedure, 1 proposal that's not subject to Assembly procedure, and 1 SR that is not subject to Assembly procedure. And if members are content, we will proceed through the agenda this morning. And the first thing is just apologies. Michael, do you have any apologies noted to you? I have Justin and John Stewart.
I have Harry Harvey and Peter McReynolds as well.
Okay, that's fine. So we are slightly low in terms of numbers this morning, but we are court, and we will proceed. Declarations of interest, just to make members aware, as I'm sure they are, that they can declare any interest that they feel is relevant at any point of the proceedings. All members, more or less, have already declared interests as they relate to infrastructure. But if an item comes up that is a particular, you can declare it at that point. Does anyone have any interest they want to declare now? Okay, that's fine. That takes us on to item 4, which is chairperson's business. The only business I have, and I think it's right to reflect on what happened last night in Northern Ireland, and with particular relevance to this committee. Obviously, the fact that a bus was burnt out in Belfast last night, quite an expensive bus. And all I want to say on this is that this committee has worked well, consensually and together on a whole range of issues. And I think we hopefully will speak as one this morning when we say things like violence is always wrong and never justified. Attacking property and people is wrong and serves no cause whatsoever. I would like to appeal to everyone to have calm heads in Northern Ireland. Further than that, there is a role for peaceful protest, and that's enshrined in our democracy, and it's a very important part of our democracy. But the key thing there is peaceful. Obviously, a lot of this has spiraled over the last 2 days from the quite heinous and appalling attack in Belfast on a member of our community. Someone's been charged, and they will go through the courts. I would also like to pay tribute to the individual who intervened in that with a hurley stick, I believe, and he's a real hero. And I think I want to reflect that as well. We have a range of issues within the United Kingdom, and for that matter in the Republic of Ireland, around immigration and border control. It's not this committee's role to get into that, but I think people do feel strongly, and there's no doubt about that, in terms of our country and also those feelings run high in the Republic as well. However, the way to solve these things is through debate and discussion and laws, and those can all be done peacefully, where people don't get hurt or killed or property damaged. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say. I have already indicated to the committee that I'm happy to open this up if anyone wants to make any comment on this, but I'm hoping to keep it respectful and reasonable. And I'll take Andrew first and then Sinead.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think the events of last night were more than distasteful. They were shameful. I think that staying within the remit of the committee, the fact that a glider bus was burnt out, I presume to the value of close to £750,000, £750,000 here, not to mention whatever repair works need to be done to our already struggling road infrastructure, is just, it's disgraceful. I would like to say as well that my colleague Peter McReynolds is an apology, and he's an apology as a direct result of some of the issues that were played out last night, and because of that, again, I think that you're correct to call for calm heads. We're correct to call for rhetoric as opposed to violence, but the truth of the matter is that sometimes our rhetoric cannot be disentangled from some of the actions that have happened, and I would certainly appeal over the next coming days that whenever politicians approach this, that they do so from a grace-filled position, but I'm not convinced that actually that has been the case, and certainly the PSNI over the last number of days, not just last night, have dealt with some very tense and febrile situations. Our fire service, again, overstretched and having to deal with essentially in arson activities, and our health service, who even on my own way home last night was seeing numerous, more than as usual, ambulances to various points within the city, I would presume. And again, it just, I think we need to take a pause, we need to take a stock. I was born in 1981, so thankfully missed a lot of it, but on my way home, along the nocturnal carriageway, I can only presume it was like something from the 70s or 80s, because the plumes of black smoke that were on the skyline was thoroughly depressing. And thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Sinead.
Thank you, Chair. So just to echo what has been said already, there is understandable revulsion and disgust at the attempted murder in Belfast 2 nights ago. However, I think the scenes that we have witnessed since are equally as horrific. They're shameful and they're disgraceful. No one has the right to terrorise innocent families. Nobody has the right to bring chaos to our streets. Nobody has the right to damage public property. The burning of a glider last night, the destruction of public property, is absolutely unacceptable. And at the end of the day, that's an act of self-harm. It's our communities who are going to be damaged by that act. So I want to send solidarity to the victim who's recovering in hospital. I want to send solidarity to our colleague on the committee, Peter McReynolds, who is ultimately not able to do his job today because of the horrific scenes and the actions that we've seen overnight. And again, I want to call for calm heads. There are dark actors and there's dark influences there exploiting people's fear, exploiting their concern. And I would call for people just to not call people onto the streets. To not close public highways, to not destroy public property. There's a way to deal with this, and it's through peaceful dialogue. That's the only way to deal with this. So I would urge those who are calling people onto the streets to desist, to stop doing that, and for people to remain calm. Calm heads need to prevail in the time ahead.
Okay, look, I think I'm content to leave it there. I think what we've shared this morning probably is fairly representative of the whole committee. And I think if there's one message going out this morning, it is that concept of calm heads, and there's ways to deal with this stuff, but it's not on the streets. It's not harming people or attacking people, and it's certainly not destroying property. So we'll leave that item there, and that's the only chair's business that I have this morning. Okay, item 5 is draft minutes. At page 15 are the draft minutes of the proceedings on the meeting of the 3rd of June. I just need to seek committee agreement that these are a true and accurate reflection, and if they are, I will sign the minutes. Our committee agreed.
Agreed.
Okay. Brilliant. Okay, matters arising. Do members have any matters arising from last week? I'll take that as a no, and that's okay. In that case, that takes us to correspondence. And the correspondence memo is at page 27. And I will take committee through any items that I've flagged up, and then at the end of all that, if anyone has any that they wish to raise, they can, of course, do so, and we will note the rest. So, we're looking at page 27, and at page 27 is a response from the Infrastructure Minister to the committee's request for the Department's assessment on whether it is at risk of exceeding the approved cash totals under vote for account, which we're probably all well aware of. At this point in time, I would just want to seek committee agreement to schedule oral evidence when a budget is agreed, or an update on spending in September if it is not agreed. Our committee agreed to that. Okay. At page 52 in your confidential pack is a response from the Minister from the committee's request for a list of privately owned reservoirs. This item of correspondence has been given a confidential marking since it contains personal information on the ownership of reservoirs following committee's previous request. The response that you have is provided for information, and of course, as it's marked confidential, should not be shared or quoted from, and I know no committee member will do that. I just want to remind committee members at this point that we are still waiting for legal advice on a whole range of matters connected with this legislation, and responses from NIEA and DERA on the potential environmental impacts of draining or abandoning reservoirs. And as committee members will note, that could be an unintended consequence of some of these regs. So,
Chair, if I may just
yes, Michael.
say, we have now received a response from DERA, and that will be in next week's pack.
Okay, that's great. Unless anyone has anything to say on that, I'm quite happy to leave that, and we are, as I said, just waiting for further core back from NIEA then, and some legal advice, which will be with us shortly. Stephen.
Just on the reservoir list, where is it? Is it on our table papers? I don't have it, or is it hard copy?
Confidential pack.
If you go back, there's a separate email on Friday.
Oh, yes,
that has
it's
the-
separate. It's not. Okay, thanks.
One of the staff will have a password if you want to get in now.
Right,
to it.
okay, aye.
Or I can pass you a list.
It's the secret password list. It's not something that we're, it's not something we're going to look at today, and obviously it's not something we're going to discuss either because of the confidential marking, but we will return to it. I know members are interested in this item and focused on it. We want to see a resolution and a way forward. There's a range of things we have to bottom out first. So I'm going to park that there. Page 53 is a response on the Minister for Infrastructure to the committee's request for clarification on the engagement the department has undertaken with counterparts in the Republic of Ireland on a voluntary motor insurance code, and what consideration is being given to a similar code in Northern Ireland. At this point in time, I just need to seek committee agreement to write to the department on what engagement it has undertaken with the UK government on this issue, if committee are agreed on that. At page 68 is a press release from the department on an update to on-street pay and display parking machines. We would just need to seek committee agreement to schedule some oral evidence with the APCOA in September. The clerk's smiling at me. He has something he wants to say about this.
It's already scheduled, Chair. It's just for members to consider that correspondence when they come to us in September.
Right, okay, that's absolutely fine. Duly noted. Are members agreed? Yeah. Page 70. A copy of the Department's response to the Committee for Communities in respect of a map of closed areas for development across Northern Ireland, specifically in relation to the Social Housing Development Programme. I wish to seek committee agreement to write to Northern Ireland Water to ask by return and by council area on the number of refused developments on the grounds of a lack of wastewater capacity and size of development. Our committee agreed to that. Okay, and I will then open it up to all committee members. There is quite a pack there of core in. If anyone wants to raise anything off that list, please do so. And if not, we will note the rest. Sounds like we're noting the rest. Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, is there agreement for that?
Is there agreement for that, to note the rest? Yes, okay. Thanks, Michael. Okay. So that takes us to item 8, which is an SL1, and it's a grant to the Water and Sewerage Undertakers Order Northern Ireland 2027. At page 117 is the clerk's memo, at page 125 is the SL1, and at pages 122 to 126 are documents that relate to that SL1. The SR is subject to draft affirmative procedure before the Assembly, and the 2016 Act introduced the power to make subordinate legislation to amend Article 2133 of the 2006 Order to extend the period during which the Department will pay a subsidy to Northern Ireland Water in lieu of domestic water charging. The rule will extend the period for further 5 years to the 31st of March 2032 and will enable the Department to continue to pay a subsidy to Northern Ireland Water in lieu of income as that otherwise would be granted from domestic water charges post the 31st of March 2027. The power is dependent on the Executive's agreement to continue its policy on this matter and to the extending the scope of the powers for a set period of time. Failure to make the SR would result in the Department not being able to pay the subsidy to Northern Ireland Water, which would render it unable to provide vital water and wastewater services. The committee's call for views are closed on the 26th of May 2026 and received no responses. At this point, I would like to welcome Julianne, Jim and Damien. Julianne is from DFI, Jim is from DFI, and Damien is the head of Northern Ireland Water Shareholder Unit within the Department for Infrastructure. I need to seek committee agreement in the first instance that this evidence is recorded by Hansard. Our committee agreed. And therefore, I can invite the officials to make a briefing, and then you might get some questions. Julianne, looks like you're in the hot seat today.
I am. Good morning, Chair and members, and thank you for inviting us to the committee this morning to brief you on the grants to Water and Sewerage Undertakers Order. I'm Julianne Dutton, Head of Water Legislation Branch. I'm joined by Damien Curran, Head of the Shareholder Unit, and Jim McComish, who's also from the Water Legislation Branch. The proposal set out in the SL1 extends the period during which the Department may make a subsidy to the Water and Sewerage Undertaker in lieu of domestic water charges for a further period of 5 years until the 31st of March 2032. You'll be aware that as current executive policy that domestic customers should not pay a separate charge for water and sewage services. Instead, this is currently funded through a subsidy paid by DFI to NI Water. At a meeting of the Executive on the 16th of April 2026, the Minister secured agreement from the Executive colleagues to continue this policy on domestic water charging and to bring forward the relevant legislation to enable this for a further 5 years. There are several advantages to extending this period by a further 5 years. It offers the next Executive time to consider and make an informed and planned decision on the future funding of the water industry. It allows time for policy research and development should the Executive wish to consider a change to the current policy. And should the next Executive decide to continue the current policy, it would allow time to prepare the necessary legislation before the end of the next mandate. The subsidy to Northern Ireland Water is paid under Article 213 of the Water and Sewerage Services Northern Ireland Order 2006. That article was most recently amended by the Grants to Water and Sewerage Undertakers Order Northern Ireland 2022, which currently has an end date of 31st of March 2027. Therefore, a new statutory rule is now required to give effect to the Executive's recent decision to continue this policy on domestic water charging and to bring forward the relevant legislation to extend this for a further 5 years. The Department has prepared the SL1 and the draft order which you have received. The order will be subject to the draft affirmative resolution procedure. Therefore, if you're content, the statutory rule will be laid and brought before the Assembly for debate in due course. I shall provide the members with some background to the legislative position. When Northern Ireland Water was established in April 2007, the initial period during which the subsidy may be paid was for 3 years to the 31st of March 2010. That end date has been amended on several occasions since then by primary legislation. Then in 2016, the Water and Sewerage Services Act Northern Ireland 2016 provided a power to amend this date by subordinate legislation rather than by primary legislation. At the same time, the Act extended the period by 1 year, as there would not have been adequate time to make the necessary statutory rule in 2016. Therefore, following that, a statutory rule was made in 2017, which amended the end date for payment of a subsidy to Northern Ireland Water to the 31st of March 2022. A further order in 2022 extended this period again until the 31st of March 2027. As that date is now approaching, it is necessary to make a further piece of legislation to continue to implement the current policy for a further 5 years, as agreed by the Executive. We would be happy to take any questions you may have regarding the SL1.
Good, thank you very much, Julie, and thanks for coming along to committee this morning. I suspect this won't be as fulsome as other evidence sessions that you've given to the committee. I mean, I've got some basic questions and I'll open up to anyone else who has any questions. I mean, essentially what we're talking about here is this is a subsidy that the Executive pays, in fact, I suppose DFI pays to Northern Ireland Water just to make sure that we get clean water on our taps every so often and we can flush toilets and so forth. It really is a subsidy that goes to Northern Ireland Water to allow it to do the job it has to do. Would that be fair enough? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. And the history of this you alluded to back in 2006. This was put in place because essentially domestic water charges weren't introduced, and we needed a route map to fund Northern Ireland Water. Would that be reasonable enough? Okay. Right. Look, the only other thing I have is in terms of the discrepancy between the PCs and maybe what Northern Ireland Water get and what it would like. I mean, is it fair to say that even in PC 21, which I think was 2.4 billion when it was eventually revised up, and we're about to go into PC 28, would you accept that that is under the level of funding that the department can provide to Northern Ireland Water at this point in time? So I didn't think that was going to be a complicated question, Damien, but there you go. What do you think?
It's not a complicated question, Chair. Yes, the level of funding that the department can provide is not up to the level as recommended by the utility regulator in PC 21 at least anyway. PC 28 going forward, that's obviously subject to both Northern Ireland Water's business plan, which is yet to be submitted, and then the utility regulator's determination of that will then, determine, what the funding level and by virtue of the revenue level Northern Ireland Water requires to do what it needs to do going forward for that period. So yes, the level of budget that the department can provide for water and sewerage services in general, as you're well aware, it's subject to a lot of competing priorities right across the board, on all public services. Northern Ireland Water is effectively a core public service that has to compete for public expenditure alongside every other core public service. And the Minister is, as you're well aware, is taking forward a three-pronged approach in terms of trying to work with the Executive to argue for additional funding to try and breach that gap between what the department can provide and what the regulator has determined is necessary. And that works, ongoing and continuous, as I'm sure you know.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Damien, your answer leads me to another question then. You mentioned PC 28. Is it your view that your understanding is that PC 28 will widen the gap, the funding gap, between what the regulator thinks Northern Ireland Water needs and what it actually gets, or do you think it's going to close that gap? I'm only asking that because you sort of opened yourself up to it in your initial answer. As
I said, it also said in my answer, it is yet to be determined, so we're really at the start of the PC 28 process. Northern Ireland Water has a number of different steps to get towards the regulator and obligations to the regulator in order for them then to take that business plan away and come to a determination against it. But listen, we're all aware that there are ever more sort of competing demands for water and sewage services, higher levels, more stringent levels of compliance as well, and that naturally is going to put an even greater demand in terms of what Northern Ireland Water is obligated to do, and by virtue of that, what the department is expected to fund. So it is a continuing sort of journey, if you like, to try and fulfil the obligations of providing a good, compliant water and sewage service.
Okay. I appreciate the 3 prongs. Don't want to get into that because the committee has, I think it's fair to say, it's questioned the level of impact those prongs are having right here, right now. We're not debating the policy intent of, for example, the SUDS bill, because that's a good thing, but we are. I think it's fair to say that the committee has sort of had some questions around the level of direct impact that the 3 prongs is going to have right here, right now, in terms of whether we can build a house in Carryduff or Newry. Would it be fair to say that, and I don't want to speak for Northern Ireland Water, it's not my job to, but my job to ask questions. The evidence that we've received in front of this committee in terms of the subsidy, and obviously this is what this is talking about and today, is that I think it's fair to say Northern Ireland Water's view is, look, we will be able to do X with Y money, but if you give us this, then we'll be able to do more. Okay, I think that's a pretty fair summary, probably, of Northern Ireland Water's position, and so they would probably say, we can only do so much with what we're given. I'm not making a pejorative comment on it, I'm just stating factually what I think their position is. And I think the challenge then really is, they will provide clean water to our taps. They will make sure our toilets flush. We turn a shower on, there'll be water. But some of the things that PC21 and I think PC28 will look at in terms of the quantum of funding they're going to need to do some of the other things, what some people might say are pretty core or important. I mean, I'm thinking of Belfast Lough and Lough Neagh in particular. And they're going to say, a little bit like TransLink recently, we can't really do that because you're not funding us at that level. And TransLink, TransLink gave evidence that was more or less what I've just said. You give us this level of funding, we will do this. But actually, without increasing that or bring it to a level of funding that we feel is necessary, we can't do other things. Would you accept that view, or would you think that view is wrong?
Well, Chair, yeah, you're absolutely right. Northern Ireland Water can only do what it can do with the level of funding that's provided to it. There's going to be different sort of scenarios, if you like, in terms of levels of funding plus levels of delivery. So, for example, Northern Ireland Water's core purpose is going to be maintaining what they've got and providing compliant, safe, clean drinking water and addressing wastewater issues. If additional funding does come available, and again that's one of our minister's prongs, if you like, in terms of arguing that with the executive.
British Treasury, I think is the phrase that you might use. Yeah.
If additional funding does become available, then Northern Ireland Water will be able to do more. It's capital infrastructure, so capital infrastructure is definite in terms of what it delivers. It's products, it's physical, and more funding will get you more physical infrastructure. And Northern Ireland Water, of course, have briefed the department in terms of what's required and what's deliverable within the funding envelope, and then what's deliverable on top of that should additional funding become available. So there's some choices there, I think, that both the department and indeed the wider executive could take, if they want to provide the funding to produce the outputs that we all want.
Yeah, okay, so thank you for your answer, Damien. I think what I'm driving towards is if we take those 3 prongs, the voluntary contributions, the SUDS bill, and more money from British Treasury, I think that's a pretty fair summary of I guess, what the Minister's prongs are. We know that voluntary contributions, and we've actually had evidence from DFI officials that, in terms of the offset of the problems that we're having with wastewater infrastructure is less than 1%, even on a good day in the next year, in terms of what that would deliver, and that carries its own consequences in terms of the price of housing. The SUDS bill, as I've said, is really good. I have been supportive of it through the entirety. The committee has scrutinised it. We expect it to go to the next stage. However, that is long game stuff. It may be right, but it's long game stuff. And unless the magic fairy with their wand comes out and suddenly says, here's some massive additional capital infrastructure for capital for Northern Ireland, I think we are looking at what other options are available and what else could be done, because what we have at the minute is having real world consequences out there in terms of just not being able to build houses, and the impact that has, and it's a very direct impact, and I make this point regularly at this committee so that people can understand it, is that this is forcing the price of housing up, and it's particularly forcing the price of housing up for young families who want to buy a house. It also means we can't build enough social housing. I was having a chat with some students yesterday. They said, well, we can't. We can't because we don't have the wastewater infrastructure. So, there is these real world consequences to this problem. I'm not going to sit here and say, here's the solution, because that's for the Minister, and her 3 prongs is her current solution. But it has having consequences. I'm going to leave it there. And thank you for your evidence, and thank you for the chat, Damien. Does anyone else have any questions they want to ask? Andrew?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I suppose, and it probably just touches on some of the points you made, if that makes sense. And apologies if you already said them, just had to dive out for something there, given the day that's in it. The mechanics of this, as in the financial mechanics of this, it is what it is, and you've sort of made reference to that. Should it, another in the next mandate be changed? What are the mechanics of changing that essentially to allow for more funding, less funding, accommodate for the funding? What is the actual mechanics of that? Sorry, just to get my head around.
I think the initial thing the executive would have to decide to make a change, and then the research would be carried out to decide what's the best option, and then there would be several years of work, I would imagine, to work through that and see how it could be implemented. So it could take, after the executive made a decision to change the policy, it could be a period of possibly 3-4 years before any change would actually be implemented. We would I guess that would take that time scale.
And then just again, touching on what the Chair said, but a similar sort of vein, if you will, the 3-pronged approach, the executive, the SUDS, and I can't actually remember the third here. Help me out.
I think it's funding, voluntary contributions, and SUDS bill.
Yes. Thank you. The mechanics of that, I mean, when those levels of, say that the executive, decides to fund it more, say Westminster decides to, or say the developer contributions, how is that, all those levels of funding then accommodated, or is it just all that there's a mechanism in there, I presume, then that allows for that change of funding? Is that fair to say?
It's the 3-pronged approach. In terms of funding, it's quite straightforward. So. Seeking further funding from the executive is just really seeking additional public expenditure, so it's additional sort of slice of the cake, if you like, that all public services have to compete for. Developer contributions is really in relation to additional income, I guess, revenue from developers, trying to have their sort of deliver more assets and have their developments come alive, and then the SUDS bill, it's more of a sort of a physical change, so there could be savings, for example, in relation to trying to the requirement for greater scale of capital infrastructure, if, for example, we have more natural drainage solutions that keep stormwater out of the system. So it'll be a combination of both public expenditure, revenue, and then a reduction in the requirement for spending public expenditure on big capital projects through better natural solutions.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Anybody else? Sinead?
Yes, Chair. So I think I think it's fair. I think we should recognise that the Minister, through the three-pronged approach and other initiatives, has unlocked more potential for more homes than would have originally been envisaged under PC 21. So I think we have to acknowledge that in the first instance. And I mean, we're talking about the three-pronged approach. It's not, you know, I think we need to be more supportive of that. I'm not suggesting anybody isn't, but because the alternative that we're talking about here is actually putting, and I think what we're not saying is the alternative here is actually putting that additional cost pressure back onto households and families. And I think it's right that the Minister has decided that's not an approach she wants to take. And I think it's welcome, and it's right that the executive have decided that's not an approach they want to take. So, you know, while there is competing pressures across all of our public services, not least of all with our wastewater infrastructure, I think we have to do all we can to support the Minister in her efforts with the British government, because essentially that's where the blame lies. That's where the funding needs to come from, because, you know, putting an additional £400 to £600 extra onto already hard-pressed households is not going to undo decades of lack of investment from the British government. So, you know, while this is not ideal, I think it is a very welcome and very substantial cost of living measure that the Minister and the Executive have taken. So I welcome that we're approving it today, I hope, and that we will continue to see that pressure taken off households, because I think that's the right thing to do.
Anyone else? Okay, that's fine. A relatively easy session for you guys, and thank you very much for coming along, and see you in a couple of weeks' time, probably. Alison, Julianne, you're nearly catching up with Alison on her frequent flyer miles in terms of. Okay. Do members have any particular views on the proposal they want to share? Okay. I'll ask a question. Are members content with the proposal for the statutory rule? Content. Okay. Right. Item 9. SL1, the road speed limit number 2 order, Northern Ireland 2026, formal consideration. At page 128 is the clerk's memo. At page 129 is the SL1, and at pages 132 to 138 are documents that relate to the SL1. The SR is not subject to procedure before the Assembly. The proposed rule will apply a 30 miles per hour speed limit to a length of Glenleven Road, Derrygonnelly, and a 30 miles per hour speed limit and a 40 miles per hour speed limit to lengths of Tunna Road, Derrygonnelly. In addition, following consideration of a request from a local councillor, introduction of these measures aims to reduce vehicle traffic on the approach to Derrygonnelly village. Glenleven Road is too narrow with no footway and is used regularly by pedestrians from the school and village to access a football playing field. It will apply a 40 miles per hour speed limit to a length of the Ballymaconachie Road and Cumber Road, Castlereagh, to reflect the increased volume of a new development accessed from these lengths of roads. It will revoke existing speed limits relating to Ballymaconachie Road and Tunna Road so that the speed limits specified above can take effect. The committee's call for views closed on the 26th of May 2026 and received no responses. No specific issues have been identified with the statutory rule as drafted. Are members content with the proposal for the statutory rule? Item 10, SL1, the Green Road Connalig Abandonment Order, Northern Ireland 2026, formal consideration. At page 140 is the clerk's memo. At page 143 is the SL1, and at pages 144 to 159 are documents that relate to the SL1. The SR is subject to negative resolution. The rule proposes an abandonment of 1,358 square metres of superseded road at Green Road, Connalig. This includes an old stone bridge and extends from a point 974.5 metres west of its junction with the Newtonards Road, for a distance of 134 metres in an easterly direction. The proposal has been brought forward at the request of a developer to facilitate the construction of a new housing development. The land to be abandoned is partly owned by the developer, with the remainder currently unregistered. Title to the unregistered portion of the land is held by the department. Upon abandonment, ownership of the land will revert to the respective registered and unregistered landowners. The committee's call for review closed on the 26th of May 2026 and received one response via the Citizen Space platform, and a further 5 responses were submitted separately. Members are referred to the clerk's memo at page 140 for detail on the objections raised. Okay. Do members have any views on the proposal? Andrew?
Just to say, Chair, that the concerns raised, and it's regrettable that the solution hasn't been found, but I think, we've reached the end of the process, I think.
Yep. The end of the line.
I don't want to say it.
Yeah. And I believe this was our railway bridge. So look, it's just to make clear, and following on from what Andrew said there, it's not the job of the committee to sort of say what has to happen to this land, or in this case, if you've read the correspondence we've got, what happens to the bridge. Ultimately, that will be for the developer and the local councillor to work out. All we can do, just for anyone watching and for clarity, is we can either agree or not agree this SR, which will abandon the rule at the request of the department. Are members content with the proposal for the statutory rule? Content. Item 11, SL1, the Motor Vehicles Driver's Licence Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2026, blood glucose levels formal consideration. Page 161 is the clerk's memo. At page 163 is the SL1, and at pages 166 to 170, documents that relate to the SL1. The SR is subject to negative resolution procedure before the Assembly. The Motor Vehicles Driver Licence Regulations, Northern Ireland 1996, prescribe certain disabilities which may affect a person's ability to drive safely a motor vehicle. In particular, Regulation 51 of the 1996 regulations describes diabetes treated with insulin as a disability for which a licence may be granted, provided the holder or applicant for a Group 2 licence adheres to specific conditions. One of these conditions is that the holder of a Group 2 licence must monitor their blood glucose levels at least twice daily, and at times relevant to driving with a blood glucose meter with a memory function. This SR will remove the reference to blood glucose monitoring, which restricts Group 2 drivers to the traditional testing method, a capillary blood glucose test, which is the finger prick test, and does not allow for technological advancements which measures glucose levels in bodily fluid. The committee's call for views closed on the 2nd of June 2026 and received no responses. No specific issues have been identified with the SR as drafted. Are members content with the SR? Item 12, SL1, the Motor Vehicles Driver Licences Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2026, ZEGV, formal consideration. At page 172 is the clerk's memo. At page 175 is the SL1, and at pages 181 to 199 are documents that relate to that SL1. The SR is subject to negative resolution procedure before the Assembly. The SR will amend the Motor Vehicles Driver Licences Regulations, Northern Ireland 1996, SR 1996-542, open bracket, the principal regulations, close brackets, in order to allow Category B licence holders to drive zero emissions vehicles with a MAM over the standard entitlement of 3,500 kilograms. The committee's call for view closed on the 2nd of July 2026 and received no responses. Are members content with the proposal for the statutory rule? Item 13, SR 2026-102, the Road Races Lockall Stages Rally Order, Northern Ireland 2026. At page 201 is the Business Office letter. At page 202 is the made order. The rule is not subject to Assembly procedure and is not requiring to be laid. There have been no changes to policy content since the SL1 was considered by this committee on the 27th of May. The rule will permit the suspension of the right-of-way of traffic on Saturday the 4th of July 2026 between 9 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. on lengths of a number of roads near Lochgall, County Armagh, to allow the North Armagh Motor Club Limited, promoters of the 2026 Lochgall Stages Rally, to run the event. Are members content with the statutory rule? Okay. Item 14 takes us to the Eastern Transport Plan. At page 208 is the clerk's memo. At page 212 is the Diallo letter. At page 214 is the background chapter. At page 300 is the Belfast City Centre Transport Plan. At page 350 is the Metropolitan Area Transport Plan. And at page 7 of table papers is the Department for Infrastructure's presentation. I'd like to welcome today James and Anthony from the Department for Infrastructure. I need to seek committee agreement that this...
We have to do that retrospectively. We don't have a decision-making quorum, but we can do that when the said member can take evidence. Though.
We can take evidence. How many do we need to take evidence, Michael? 4. No one else is allowed to leave the room. FYI. We're at our de minimis level here. We will retrospectively, when Sinead comes back, seek agreement that the evidence session is recorded by Hansard, but we shall not do that now. Or we shall wait till she returns. We instead will hand over to James and Anthony to give us a presentation, and then, gentlemen, you may expect some questions. Over to you.
Well, good morning, Chair and members, and thank you for the opportunity to brief the committee today on the Eastern Transport Plan. My name is James Redman, Director of Transport Planning, Modelling and Data, and I'm joined today by Tony Rafferty, Principal Transport Planner and the Project Manager for the ETP, which is the Eastern Transport Plan. The Eastern Transport Plan is a key element in shaping how our transport system will support economic growth, improve connectivity and contribute to the wider environmental and social outcomes across the region. Just 2 weeks ago we met with the committee to outline the transport strategy and its engagement. Today we are here to brief you on the first transport plan, the Eastern Transport Plan, which sets out that strategic direction and how it can be delivered in a local context. The draft ETP has been prepared for an upcoming public consultation where we hope to stimulate discussion and debate on the proposals presented. The documents provided to members include the background chapter, which has been through our graphics team, while the companion documents are still being finalised in terms of presentation ahead of consultation. However, I want to reassure members that the detail and the substance are all consistent across both. In late 2023, we engaged with the public on a vision and objectives of the plan and received broad support. Across the full Eastern Transport Plan engagement exercise, over 500 responses were received, and the detailed engagement report is available on the department's website for reference. Building on that, we have worked closely with local councils, statutory bodies and other key stakeholders to develop a suite of proposals for the metropolitan area, including the Belfast City Centre. This has involved extensive stakeholder engagement with organisations including local councils, TransLink, IMTEC, cross-departmental colleagues, Belfast Chamber, the British Irish Council, the National Transport Authority in the Republic of Ireland and Dublin City Council. Engagement has taken place through a mix of face-to-face and online presentations, also workshops, and even the now well-known Tony's Walking Tours, which to ground proposals in real-world experience has proved very beneficial. Members will have received copies of the draft Eastern Transport Plan Metropolitan Area and the Belfast City Centre plans, and today's session provides an opportunity to highlight the key elements and respond to any initial queries you may have. With your agreement, Chair, I will now hand over to Tony, who will provide a short presentation. He will set out some of the background and context of the plan, outline the main proposals and explain how we intend to take this forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, James, and thank you, Chair. To begin with, I want to outline how the transport plans provide a link between the transport strategy and individual projects and schemes. The transport strategy details the transport policy to 2035 and the transport plan stands as the transport strategy stands as a daughter document to the regional development strategy. The ETP adds geographical detail for the transport infrastructure elements of the strategy. Other policies such as decarbonisation, public transport, community transport and so on are managed separately through different means. Once a final transport plan is published, it will outline a series of schemes and projects to be taken forward. They'll be taken forward by delivery teams. These projects and schemes will be subject to funding and statutory processes. The department is preparing a suite of 8 transport plans in total. There are 7 local transport plans focusing on shorter local transport journeys. Each plan will follow the same methodology so that we can build up a complete plan for Northern Ireland. The strategic plan and policy statement requires transport planning to be integrated with land use planning. And so the local transport plans will support the local development plans of each council. The Eastern Transport Plan is the local transport plan for a 5-council area. Those councils are Antrim and Newton Abbey, Ards and North Down, Belfast, Lisburn, Castlereagh and Mid and East Antrim. The 8th Transport Plan is the Regional Strategic Transport Plan. It focuses on the longer interurban bus journeys, the entire railway network and also the interurban road journeys, as well as considering access to ports, airports and border crossings. Given the advanced stages of the Belfast City Council Local Development Plan, the first iteration of the ETP covers all of Belfast City Council area. However, it's important to plan the entire TransLink Metro network as a single entity. So the first iteration of the plan has been expanded to cover metropolitan areas including Newton Abbey, Castlereagh and Dundonald. The proposals for the remaining areas will be considered when the LDP zoning information becomes available from the other councils. Hopefully that's provided a little bit of background to the plan. 3 sections of the plan were shared last week with members and we'd like to invite questions on them now. Thank you, Chair.
That's great, thank you, Anthony. I'll start off just with the final sentence you used there. You said that the ETP was going to be rolled out more widely. There was a graphic you shared there with a little blue line that seemed to circle around Belfast and some other areas, and you said it would be expanded once the LDPs were available from other councils. How close are those councils to getting those LDPs to you, and what impact will that actually have?
It varies. The councils are all at different stages. 3 or 4 of the councils have published their planned strategies, whereas Ards and North Down have just finished the consultation on their planned strategy and are a little bit further behind. Some of them, for instance, Mid and East Antrim, have just completed a call for sites and are gathering up that information. So I can't really comment on the council's timelines per se, but we're expecting that information for some of the councils relatively soon, and we're hoping that we'll be in a position to complete the remaining council areas over the next year or 2.
Would it be fair to say, Anthony, that the LDPs are important to completing what you're scoping out here?
Very much so. We're looking at a 2035 time horizon, and what we don't want to do is plan for today's network and miss opportunities, or not be able to provide for the development or for the network to cope with the development that's coming forward over the next 9 to 10 years.
Okay. It's pretty clear from the plan that there is an emphasis on reducing environmental impacts, and obviously that's something everyone would want to see by I think it was called sort of more sustainable travel options and a general reduction on private car use. And we can see the benefit in that. I mean, you probably will be aware of committee evidence over the last couple of weeks where we have the major public transport body, TransLink, stating that they were going to be reducing routes. You can possibly see the dichotomy there, but certainly I would maybe tease out another point before asking you to comment on that. Is obviously if you want to do this, the public infrastructure has to be there to facilitate it. So we see in successful European cities, and for that matter, somewhere like London, which has a very substantial subway network, people don't have cars because they don't need them because they can jump on a subway and go to X and Y. We do not have that. And so if you want to try, as part of this plan, to reduce environmental impacts, surely the public transport options have to get better, I would say, to encourage people to do that. And in the context of the sort of information that we've had last 2 weeks, TransLink are in a position where they're starting to pull routes. What are your comments on that?
By providing the infrastructure that we're proposing within the plan, we can shorten journey times. That comes with operational savings for TransLink, and those operational savings can be reinvested back into, for instance, higher frequency of services, all within the existing budget. But we need to plan for the future. The city's going to grow. We need to plan for that growth. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that the budget situation today should stop us from planning for growth in the future.
I think even just to add to that, the last transport plan for the Belfast metropolitan area took us to 2015. So there's been a 10-year vacuum there, and I suppose in relation to, back to Tony's point, in relation to planning for the future and the ambitions of both the council, but also in relation to where we want to be on a Northern Ireland basis as well. No, it kind of was important. So 10 years ago was the 10-year vacuum is a long time. No, in terms of the transport plan and the transport plan that you see and in draft form today is very different, because in terms of setting back to the strategy and where the direction of travel needs to we want to go, in terms of we need to show a plan in relation to what that looks like. And I think that's what the ETP version is trying to do. And I suppose in relation to that, shouldn't be, even though that there is uncertainty in relation to that budget, in terms of that shouldn't distract us from being able to plan for the future.
No, I agree. What plan have we not had since 2015, James?
Belfast Metropolitan Transport Plan. So I suppose
it was developed, I think it was published in around 2002, and it had a 2015 time horizon.
And is there a reason that has never been updated up till now?
After the plan was published, the transport planning team within the department over the coming years was wound down, and it was only following, it was around about 2015-2016 that the department started to step it up to meet our requirement of integrating land use and transport planning through the strategic plan and policy statement requirement.
Yeah, okay. Final question then from me is just around scoping of what level of scoping has been carried out in terms of cost estimate for this. Where is the department in terms of that?
We have been working on indicative costs for the proposals, but until we go to public consultation and take the public views on board and produce a final plan, we can't finalise those costs.
You're going to public consultation on a range of options, I'm guessing?
We're going to public consultation to hear the views on the proposals as set out in the documents provided.
Militia.
Roger Rove, you're very welcome. Just in relation to the previous plan, say 10 years ago, I'm sure it would have had objectives outlined at that point in time. To what extent did they sort of achieve any of those objectives?
That plan was possibly the first trying to deliver on some of the newer policy, where we were moving away from a very car-dominated plan, and for the first time it included things like bus quality corridors. Of those corridors, the one that we have provided is BRT Phase 1 on the East-West corridor. There are definitely elements of the plan that were never completed.
So again, I asked the question, to what extent did it actually achieve any of the objectives that had been outlined at that time, in terms of even, say, let's say, modal shift and the likes for people, whether travelling by rail, bus or car or walking?
Well, the Belfast Metropolitan Transport Plan, what it tried to do is, in terms of it, particularly in relation to point to things like the glider, pointing to, so also in terms of Belfast on the Move projects within the city centre. So that did start the sort of transformation within the city centre itself into that sustainable mode. So prior to that, it was a very sort of car dominant, less bus priority within the city centre. And I think what you will see, you can see in terms of that transformation in relation to what the glider's done to providing that sort of east to west connectivity, connecting to the main attractors in the hospitals as well as the city centre core, but also in relation to the reshaping of the city centre and what that looks like in terms of that bus priority to sort of start to move those people. I suppose in relation to where we are now with this plan, I suppose we want to build on that, in terms of those successes, and I suppose in terms of we want to extend that public transport opportunities, so in terms of the glider, the south, the north to south version of that, but also in relation to recognising the ambitions of Belfast City Council in terms of their growth aspirations relating to the harbour, but also in relation to the city centre living aspirations in terms of the local development plan. I suppose what we realise that in terms of that city centre and its resilience needs to be improved, and we can't do that by building more roads because the city centre is already, we're not going to start knocking buildings down, as a result to try and create capacity for the road network. So what we want to do is in terms of how can we better use the existing road network that we have, and how we do that is to shift people and that movement of people. And I suppose in relation to the additional measures in relation to the glider, the additional public transport there, and the active travel Belfast City and the Belfast Cycle Network plan in relation to how they holistically all sit together within a wider Belfast plan. And I suppose that's that focus and that people-centred approach in relation to moving people rather than the car dominance within a city centre.
I'm sure too that would be easier sort of assessed in terms of, say, the urban areas such as Belfast or the likes of it, whereas whenever it comes to the sort of Eastern Transport Plan, it might not be as easily accessed in relation to what is actually happening outside of the city. But in addition, I'm sure too that you require quite a lot of support and assistance here from local councils and so on. And there's many plans within the plans itself. And to what extent have they been costed?
Plans within the plans?
Yeah. I would assume that each and every council area that you would actually cover here, they're coming forward with their own local development plans and the likes of it, and they would be embracing the very concept that you talk about here.
Yeah, they are, and that's a two-stage process. So they set out their policies within their plan strategy, which they've done. They're now moving on and adding the geographical elements to that, similar to the approach we've done with the transport strategy and the transport plan. From their point of view, it's more they're facilitating development rather than paying for it. So I'm not sure how they've costed that.
At times I often just get a wee bit concerned, and when I hear presentations say of this nature and that as well too, that it's aspirational, but to what extent will it actually be realised, say, in 10 years' time or whatever?
But I suppose in relation to that, yes, it is an ambitious plan, but it's also a credible plan, I suppose. And when we've developed this plan, it's underpinned by data modelling to understand in relation to what that future looks like. It's not just in relation to a wish list in relation to how we think. So in relation to the data and evidence that we're using to support and is a common thread through all the transport plans that we're developing, is in relation to. Be back to you probably heard us mention about the vision and validate in relation to what do we want our towns and cities to look like, kind of way, in terms of the currently very congested, very car dominant, to be able to sort of flip that round in relation to that people-centred, places where people want to live, dwell, and move, is in terms of how we do that is a transformation, kind of way. It won't be done overnight either. So in relation to the measures that we've sort of brought forward are in that draft plan, are being packaged up in sort of stages as well. So in terms of there'll be incremental build and to this, and we'll be building on the fact. So in terms there's already commitments from the Minister in relation to the Belfast Rapid Transit, the north-south, the belt that you've got the cycle network. Where in relation to we've got 10% of our transport budget has to be contributed, and there's already schemes that are in motion in relation to what they look like. What the plan does is tries to bring all those together in relation to how they look, within our streetscape, in relation to how that looks across our network as well, and more a cohesive network rather than a fragmented network. And I think that's what the plan is trying to do with the 10 years that we've been operating within. There's a lot of people trying to do a lot of different things, but it's not being joined up. And I suppose what the plan does is brings all these together. It's a multimodal plan, so it looks at the car. So it's not necessarily saying that the car is dead and we're not having the car, but what it's just saying in terms of active travel with public transport, how can we move those people, but also in terms of we're up and providing that sort of movement for the vehicle as well, and it be as less dominant on the network as some of the other modes.
And I wish you fair one, just in hopefully achieving the objectives that you have laid out for yourselves there. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Sinead.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not going to cover the questions you've asked, but I just to reiterate your point, I think it's well made. The mark of any sort of modern town or city across Europe or across the world is how well their public transport network works. What options are there for other active travel, as you said, in terms of walking and cycling. So I think this is good and it's welcome, and I think that will go a long way to address some of those issues and take cars out of our city centres and encourage people to use public transport. and obviously it is right that they're linked to the local development plans, but as I said, I'm not going to cover the questions you asked, but there's a section in there in terms of monitoring, which I think is very welcome. So I suppose with the not all councils are at the same stage in terms of their local development plans, and I know you obviously need to move forward with this, so it's a bit of a it's a bit unwieldy in terms of that. So in terms of that monitoring piece, is there, or can you provide any more information just in terms of how that could work in real time as the development plans start to come to fruition, or if you see that that's not working in this particular area or we need to change to a different mode, is there inbuilt flexibility there in terms of that, changing things in real time with this plan?
Yes, we have tried to step up our data within the department. We've established a data modelling branch, and we have set up sensors across the around the edge of the city centre, for instance, that can record the number of people who would walk, cycle, use cars or buses crossing into the city centre. Previously, we every 5 years or so would have carried out a Belfast cordon survey to identify a 1 hour peak movements into the city centre. We now have the ability to have that data 24/7, 365 days a year, which is a much richer data set. That means that as schemes come forward, we will be able to assess the impacts of them. And while this is a 10-year plan, certainly if we aren't achieving the goals that we want to achieve, there will be the ability through that scheme design implementation to tweak or change. But we do also intend to put review periods within the plan so that we can review and identify how well we're performing and whether or not we need to change tact partway through the period rather than waiting for 10 years.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. No, thank you.
And Ethan, I suppose just to add to that point in relation to how the transport plan is being built, and you'll see a reference to the place movement framework in there. So that framework is essentially not every link or road will look the same, because in relation to constraint and widths and things like that, but in relation to what the methodology and the approach being taken is that there's a level of flexibility to be built into that sort of place movement framework. So in relation to there's a set of guardrails in there in relation to what that place movement framework looks like for individual links, but also in terms of there's also a set of tools in relation to how we can tweak and change to change intent the design to help achieve what we need to achieve and what the vision is for that plan as well, for that particular link or that particular route or that particular area of the network.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Sinead. So I get the concept that there isn't any costings to this, and it's picking up sort of on a theme that Militia sort of started there. Has there been any consideration as to where the funding in general terms for this plan will come from?
Yes, again, once we have a final published plan, we have a delivery team now established, and part of the delivery team's functions are going to be to try and secure funding. We have previously made bids to the investment strategy of Northern Ireland just to put it on the radar that these transport plans are coming forward and that funding is going to be required from them. But in the shorter term, as James mentioned, we already have some committed schemes such as BRT Phase 2 and the Belfast Cycle Network. Early work on the ETP over the next, maybe the first year or two after publication will be focused on how do we embed more ETP measures into those schemes that are already existing and on the ground. That comes with a couple of advantages. We might be able to do quite a lot with just a smaller initial budget, but also it would save multiple disruptions to particular areas of the city centre if we can deliver in a single phase.
BRT2 is the north-south glider, is that right? Yeah, okay. I mean, I get why we need a plan, and it's important because we need to take Belfast forward. We definitely don't want to be in a situation where we're left with a large gap and no planning's been done. So if capital was realised, we couldn't deliver on anything because we didn't have a plan to do that. I sort of get that. Equally, and it's been well rehearsed at this committee, we have like the North-South glider, lots of that hasn't. Look, I don't want to be unfair. Is that behind? Is BRT2 behind in terms of where you'd want it to be by this stage?
I suppose we are not part of that delivery team, so it might be more appropriate for somebody from the delivery team to comment. My understanding is that it's on track with the current programme.
Okay.
I think just add to that point, and not necessarily in the North-South glider point, but in relation to the funding element. I suppose the purpose of the plan is not only to give us an understanding in relation to what Belfast should look like, but as new developments come forward, developer contributions and things like that. It's not just in relation to us as a department would be funding all these interventions and as well. There's an onus, and you'll see the common theme that runs through the strategy and also the plan. There's a public-private partnership here that in relation to the private development as well, and from the engagement that we've had to date, and we've had extensive engagement to date, in relation to stakeholders are on board with what this plan and this vision is, and this is what they want. So in relation to, as we bring this forward, and that means in relation to the Chamber and Belfast City Council, but also in relation to a lot of stakeholders who have got an interest in relation to what that Belfast City Centre looks like and how we can make it better from what it is today. And I suppose in terms of that's where the funding, so in terms of, yes, the department will have, there's funding opportunities there, but also in terms of the private developments as they come forward will help support, fund and provide an input into that vision as well for that city centre. So in terms of, and I think to date, one of the issues with when we operate without a plan, it means that we get this fragmented development where we just get a bit over here, with not a bit here and a bit, and everything's not connected, and that's the purpose James, of the plan.
And it's not a criticism of the plan in itself, because I think that's an important thing to have, and I get that. I mean, in terms of BRT2, I suppose the defence line would be, well, phase 1 is happening, but my understanding is that we don't yet, just on BRT2, we don't have the full North Belfast corridor, we don't have the full South Belfast corridor, we don't have the Gingormley extension, we don't have the Carryduff extension. Okay, so and all those things are important. I get that. I'll give you one more example. York Street interchange, £27 million has been spent. The programme has rolled since confidence in supply for, I don't know, 8 years, and all that's happened is we seem to have spent money on it, and we haven't even been able to deliver it. And even if we wanted to deliver it now, it would take probably 5 or 6 years to actually deliver that project, for a whole host of reasons. So it's not that I don't want you to go away from committee thinking, giving you a hard time or we don't like your plan. No. That's not the case. The plan is important. It's the committee's job to ask difficult questions. And when I see, and it really following on again from what Melissa said, there is this aspirational aspect to some of these plans that we do see. And that's fine, and I like that, right? It's good that we have plans and we have them in place. However, funding is really tight, and then when we look at other projects that the department have been asked to deliver on or have the varies to deliver, there are big problems. We speak to people about BRT2, and they'll go, well, why are we behind? I mean, I can answer a question. I don't answer a question I don't know the answer to. I mean, it is behind, and people are frustrated about it. York Street interchange is another example, and there's a whole host of reasons. Many are not the default of the Department for Infrastructure. But you know what? That doesn't matter. It's about what we can deliver for everybody in Northern Ireland, or in this case in Belfast and the Eastern Transport Plan. So I suppose it's just to voice those frustrations that people looking in perhaps will go, we've got this amazing plan that's going to do X, Y, and Z and could cut routes, and I don't doubt any of that. But there'll be other people going, why haven't they done this? Or why haven't they even finished this? Or why haven't they started this? And here's something else. I'm not asking you to comment unless you wish to on that, but it's just voicing some level of, I suppose, public frustration around it.
Well, I think, I suppose all we can say from the plan's point of view is that it'll be good to have a plan in place so that we can point to our top priorities and focus our expense on that.
Anthony, nobody doubts that, and I agree completely. It is important. I suppose it's how that becomes operationalised and the timescales involved in that, and things that impact all of this that are outside your obviously rule within the area that you work within DFI. I've had no other indications. So look, thank you very much for your time this morning, gentlemen, for coming along to the committee and sharing your evidence. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will just jump into my DeLorean and now ask for agreement that the evidence session is recorded by Hansard. Our committee agreed. Agreed. Thank you, Andrew, for getting the gag, and thank you, Hansard, for coming and doing that for us. Okay, anything from that, Michael, from you?
There was no additional information offered or sought, but there was one question that officials couldn't answer, and that was the timescales for BRT2 and reasons for any delay.
Let's write to the department and ask that. If our committee agreed on that one? Okay. That takes us to forward work programme. Page 395 is the draft work programme. I have to inform members that we are expecting 2 private members' bills to reach first stage before summer recess. And I need to seek agreement to have both bill sponsors before the committee on the 1st of July, provided their bills have been introduced. Our committee agreed to that. I also need to seek committee agreement to proceed with the evidence sessions as set out in the draft forward work programme and to reflect any decisions that we have taken today. Our committee agreed on that. Okay.
Chair, it's just on the private members bill. See, it's I can see the first one here. Is there a second one? I don't see the second one. Just which one is that going to? Oh,
So,
right. Okay, yeah, that's fair enough.
So I suspect we're probably not talking about them necessarily in open session, but there are 2. Yeah. Okay. Michael?
If I could just say, Chair, to members, the DVA external meeting will not be taking place on the 24th of June. I'll come back to the committee with a revised plan for that.
Noted. Item 16, any other business? Do members have AOB? Okay. Item 17 is the date, time and location of next meeting. I wish to inform members that the next meeting will take place at 10 a.m. on Wednesday the 10th of June 2026 in room 29. Before Oliver hits the button of power, just to explain to anyone who's watching online that we are going to go in a closed session. We won't be back after this. Sorry, but we are going to take some time to discuss our planning review, and that is a planning review that this committee has undertaken around reasonably significant developments, timescales and judicial reviews. And so we're going to go in a closed session and we will see you next week. Thank you.
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 Sound.